Welcome to the Where in the World Geography series on the United States and capitals plus physical features, where students memorize and engage geography through repetition and discussion. Digital student geography workbooks available for purchase online at bit.ly/WITWGEO. Paperback coming August 2020. Today we are learning about U.S. bays plus one great Canadian bay. But first, review time of the last 5 lessons. To the map we go! Here we have the entire United States of America. I'll give you a little time to answer each question on your own, followed by the reveal of the geographical point to see if you were right. Let's zoom in. First, we'll review the Northern Appalachians. What is the name of this mountain range? If you said White Mountains, you would be right. Next, what is the name of this mountain range? If you said the Green Mountains, you would be right again. What is the name of this range in New York called? If you said the Adirondacks, you would be correct. Name this mountain range. If you said the Allegheny Mountains, you would be right again. Now on to the review of the Southern Appalachians. To begin with, we don't have a mountain range, but a valley that runs through all of the Appalachians. What is this valley called? If you said the Great Valley, you would be right again. Next, what is this mountain range called? If you said the Blue Ridge Mountains, you would be correctamundo. What is this smaller range called? If you said the Great Smoky Mountains, or maybe just the Smokies, you would be right. Now for our last mountain range within the Appalachians that we have learned about. What is this beautiful mountain range called? If you said the Cumberland Mountains, you would be right. Now there is one mountain within the Blue Ridge Mountain Range that is the highest elevation west of the Mississippi River. What is the name of this mountain? If you said Mount Mitchell, you would be correct. Heading west. What is the name of this prominent mountain range that is the second largest in the whole world? If you said Rocky Mountain Range, you would be correct. Next, what is this mountain within the Rocky Mountain Range located in Colorado called? If you said Pikes Peak, you would be right. Not too far off is this 14er. The tallest mountain in the Rockies. What is this mountain called? If you said Mount Elbert, you would be right. Moving further west, we have a mountain range that is mostly in California, with a small portion located in Nevada that casts a rain shadow, making Nevada the driest state in the U.S. What is this mountain range called? If you said Sierra Nevada, you would be correct. Within the Sierra Nevada is the tallest mountain in the lower 48 states. What is this mountain called? If you said Mount Whitney, you would be right. Moving now to the Northwest Mountains. What mountain range is this that goes through a bit of Canada, south through Washington and Oregon, reaching into Northern California? If you said the Cascade Mountain Range, you would be right. What is this stratovolcano called, found in Washington State? If you said Mount Rainier, you would be correct. Moving just a little bit south, also in Washington, what is the name of this stratovolcano that blew on May 18, 1980? If you said Mount St. Helens, you would be right. Now we come to the great state of Alaska, the last frontier and within the largest mountain on the continent of North America. What is the name of this mountain? If you said Denali, you would be correct. On to the Great Lakes plus Niagara Falls. To begin with, do you remember our acronym? HOMES. Homes. Our first letter in our acronym is H. What symbol do we need to erase in order to put our H? If you said diamond, you would be right. Now that we've put our H in, what does H stand for? If you said Huron, you would be correct. Our second letter in our acronym is O. What symbol do we need to erase in order to put our O? If you said star, you would be right. Now that we have put our O in, what does O stand for? If you said Ontario, you would be correct. Our third letter in our acronym is M. What symbol do we need to erase in order to put our M? If you said circle, you would be right. Now that we've put our M in, what does M stand for? If you said Michigan, you would be correct. Our fourth letter in our acronym is E. What symbol do we need to erase in order to put our E? If you said square, you would be right. Now that we've put our E in, what does E stand for? If you said Erie, you would be right. Our final and fifth letter in our acronym is S. What symbol do we need to erase in order to put our S? If you said spiral, you would be right. Now that we have put our S in, what does S stand for? If you said superior, you would be correct. And finally, in between Lake Ontario and Lake Erie, straddling the border between New York in the U.S. and Canada, is what notable physical feature? If you said Niagara Falls, you would be correctamundo. Now that we are done with review, I am going to introduce you to this week's lesson about 4 U.S. bays plus 1 Canadian bay. Back to the map. First, we have a bay that is 200 miles long that connects to the Atlantic Ocean. This bay is called Chesapeake Bay. Next, we head north into Canada to this very large body of water called Hudson Bay. Third, we go west to California State to the San Francisco Bay. Going north now for our fourth stop at Puget Sound. Lastly, for our final destination, we go to the East Coast, south of Chesapeake Bay, where we will learn about Pamlico Sound. Now off we go to learn about all these bays. Let's jump right in. Known for both its bounty and beauty, the Chesapeake Bay is the largest estuary in the U.S. at 64,299 square miles that border the U.S. states of Maryland and Virginia. As an estuary, Chesapeake Bay is a coastal body of water that is partially enclosed, with one or more rivers streaming into it and connecting to the open ocean. When fresh water from these rivers empties into the bay, the water's salinity, which is salt content, increases. The fresh water becomes brackish water, which is saltier than fresh water but not as salty as the ocean water. This brackish water is a result of mixing the fresh water from over 150 rivers and streams with the seawater from the Atlantic Ocean. The rivers that flow into the Chesapeake Bay come from 6 different states. They include New York, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia, as well as our country's capital, Washington, D.C. With its southern portion in Virginia and the northern portion in Maryland, the Chesapeake Bay is an essential feature for the ecology and economy of those 2 states as well as others, for there are over 2,700 species of plants and animals, as well as producing 500 million pounds of seafood each and every year. At length, the bay is approximately 200 miles from the north headwaters coming from the Susquehanna River to the Atlantic Ocean outlet. It is almost 3 miles wide at its narrowest and 30 miles at its widest, which is just south of the mouth of the Potomac River. The average depth is 21 feet. However, it does reach down to a maximum of 174 feet deep. Each day, the Susquehanna pours an average of 3 billion gallons of fresh water into the Chesapeake Bay. It furnishes 90% of the upper bay's fresh water and 50% of the entire bay's supply. Two notable architectural feats include the two bay bridges. One resides in Maryland called the Chesapeake Bay Bridge and goes from Sandy Point to Kent Island. The second bridge is in Virginia and is called the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. It travels between Virginia Beach and Cape Charles. The Chesapeake Bay Bridge, known to locals as simply Bay Bridge, is a major dual-span bridge. Spanning the Chesapeake Bay, this bridge runs for 4.3 miles. The original construction included just one span that opened in 1952 and, at that time, was the world's longest continuous over-water steel structure. The second parallel span was added in 1973. For over 55 years, the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel has captured worldwide attention as a modern engineering wonder and an essential East Coast travel convenience. This bridge crossed both over and under open waters where the Chesapeake Bay meets the Atlantic Ocean. It opened on April 15, 1964, and following the opening, the bridge tunnel was selected as one of the 7 engineering wonders of the modern world in a worldwide competition that included more than 100 major projects. Also in 1965, it was distinguished as the Outstanding Civil Engineering Achievement by the American Society of Civil Engineers. Reaching back in time, the Chesapeake Bay was the site of the Battle of Chesapeake in 1781, where the French fleet defeated the British Royal Navy in the naval battle of the American Revolutionary War. The crushing of the Brits enabled George Washington and his French allied armies to aid with the onslaught of the British Army. That was the Chesapeake Bay, known for its bounty and its beauty. Now, we are going to learn about the Great Bay called Hudson Bay in Canada. Hudson Bay, historically referred to as Hudson's Bay, is a large body of saltwater in northeastern Canada with a surface area of 470,000 square miles. Although not geographically related, it is for climate reasons is considered to be a marginal sea of the Arctic Ocean. As you can see with this satellite image provided by NASA, how large of an area the Hudson Bay is compared to the size of the United States. If that bay was on our land, half of the states wouldn't exist. This body of water has many rivers draining into it from a vast area of about 1,490,900 square miles. In Canada, the rivers belong to parts of southeastern Nunavut, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, and all of Manitoba. Also, smaller indirect river passages from parts of North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, and Montana in the United States drain into the Hudson Bay. Hudson Bay is the second largest water body using the term bay in the world after the Bay of Bengal. Comparatively, Hudson Bay is shallow with an average depth of 330 feet, whereas the Bay of Bengal is 8,500 feet deep on average. During the Age of Exploration, circa 1400 to 1600 AD, was marked by many notable figures like Columbus, Magellan, Diaz, and others, the search for a western route to Cathay and the Indies directly resulted in the discovery of Hudson Bay in the latter part of the 15th century. English explorers and colonists named Hudson Bay after Sir Henry Hudson, who explored the bay beginning on August 2, 1610, on his ship called Discovery. In 1611, on his fourth voyage to North America, Hudson worked his way around Greenland's west coast and into the bay, mapping much of its eastern shore. Discovery became trapped in the ice over the winter, and the crew survived on shore at the southern tip of James Bay. When the ice cleared in the spring, Hudson wanted to explore the rest of the area, but his crew did not. In retaliation, the ship's crew declared mutiny on June 22, 1611. They left Hudson and others adrift on a small boat. No one knows the fate of Hudson or the crew members stranded with him, but historians see no evidence that they survived for long afterward. In May 1612, Sir Thomas Button sailed from England with 2 ships to look for Henry Hudson and to continue the search for the Northwest Passage to India. 56 years later, in 1668, a ship named Nonsuch, which, when translated, means unequaled, was on the first ever trading voyage that reached the bay and traded for beaver pelts, leading to the creation of the Hudson's Bay Company, which still bears the famous name today. The Hudson's Bay Company negotiated a trading monopoly from the English crown for the Hudson Bay watershed, and they called it Rupert's Land. France contested this grant by sending several military expeditions to the region, but abandoned its claim to the Treaty of Ulbrich, April 1713. During this period, the Hudson's Bay Company built several forts and trading posts along the coast at the mouth of major rivers. These strategic locations were bases for inland exploration. More importantly, they were trading posts with the indigenous peoples who came to them with furs from their trapping season. The Hudson's Bay Company then shipped the furs to Europe and continued to use some of these posts well into the 20th century. Hudson's Bay Company's trade monopoly was abolished in 1870, and it ceded Rupert's Land to Canada as part of the Northwest Territories. However, still today, Hudson's Bay Company is still in operation more than 350 years later. However, they have reinvented themselves quite a lot from their fur trading days. Today, Hudson's Bay Company serves the public as a department store in Canada. That was the second largest bay in the world, Hudson Bay. Now, we head south back into our United States and west to San Francisco Bay. San Francisco Bay is a shallow estuary in the U.S. state of California, surrounded by an area referred to as the San Francisco Bay Area or just the Bay Area. Close by are the great cities of San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland. San Francisco Bay drains water from approximately 40% of California. As you may know, rivers and their various tributaries or streams flow into the ocean. But how does it make it all the way there? And after it arrives in the San Francisco Bay, where does the water flow next? Let's take a look. Water from the San Francisco and San Joaquin rivers and from the Sierra Nevada mountains flow into Suasun Bay, which then travels through the Carquinez Strait to meet with the Napa River at the entrance to San Pablo Bay, which connects at its south end to San Francisco Bay. It then connects to the Pacific Ocean via the Golden Gate Strait. However, this entire group of interconnected bays is often called the San Francisco Bay, and the water flows through what is referred to as the Bay Delta. The Bay Delta encompasses 738,000 acres. 5 rivers flow into the delta, accounting for nearly half of the snowmelt and runoff of the entire state. The most noted are the San Joaquin and Sacramento rivers. Because the delta is connected to San Francisco Bay and thus to the ocean, it is affected by tidal action. Although the delta for the most part remains fresh water, this tidal action affects the depth of the waterways. There are approximately 2 high tides and 2 low tides every day. Once a vast marsh, the delta began changing rapidly when unsuccessful gold miners turned to farming and began draining and reclaiming the land in the mid-1800s. They were encouraged by federal swampland reclamation laws and the delta's rich, fertile peat soil. They built levees, creating islands of productive farms. The reclamation of the marshy delta progressed steadily for many decades and was mostly complete by the 1930s. This is what the delta looks like today from above. It is a maze of over 1,100 waterways that traverse prime farmland and natural habitat areas with levees surrounding numerous islands or tracts. Some islands are only accessible by private boat and some by ferries and bridges. The delta is an estuary, which, if you remember from the Chesapeake Bay, is a body of water that is formed when fresh water from rivers and streams meets up with the ocean and mixes with the salty seawater, creating a vibrant ecosystem. The California Delta, along with the San Francisco, San Pablo, and Suisun Bays, is the largest estuary on the Pacific coast and is home to over 750 plant and animal species. The Delta is home to a vibrant diversity of wildlife and birds, including millions of migratory birds who stop over on one of the last remaining wetlands on the California coast. Sandhill cranes arrive about late September to spend fall and winter here. The Delta supports vibrant commercial and recreational fisheries. 80% of the state's commercial fishery species either live in or migrate through the delta, including 4 Chinook salmon runs, sturgeon, and striped bass. There are 5 large islands in San Francisco Bay. Alameda, the largest island, was created when a shipping lane was cut to form the Port of Oakland in 1901. It is now a suburban community. Angel Island was known as Ellis Island West because it served as the entry point for immigrants from East Asia. It is now a state park accessible by ferry. Mountainous Yerba Buena Island is pierced by a tunnel linking the east and west spans of the San Francisco-Oakland Bay Bridge. Attached to the north is the artificial and flat Treasure Island, site of the 1939 Golden Gate International Exposition. Isolated in the center of the bay is Alcatraz, the site of the famous federal prison. The federal prison on Alcatraz no longer functions, but the complex is a popular tourist site. The bay became the center of American settlement and commerce in the far west through most of the remainder of the 19th century. During the California Gold Rush from 1848 until 1855, San Francisco Bay suddenly became one of the world's greatest seaports, dominating shipping in the American West until the last years of the 19th century. However, there were hundreds of boats that were abandoned in the Bay Area from all around the world that arrived with a dream to hit it big. Most of these boats were later stripped and recycled to build housing in San Francisco. One of the iconic treasures of the San Francisco Bay is the Golden Gate Bridge. This is a suspension bridge spanning the Golden Gate, which is a 1-mile wide strait that connects San Francisco Bay to the Pacific Ocean. The structure links the city of San Francisco in California State to Marin County. The bridge is one of the most internationally recognized symbols of San Francisco, California, and the United States. It was designed by engineer Joseph Strauss in 1917. It has been declared one of the wonders of the modern world by the American Society of Civil Engineers. At the time of its opening in 1937, it was both the longest and the tallest suspension bridge in the whole world, with a main span of 4,200 feet and a total height of 746 feet. It has been described as possibly the most beautiful, certainly the most photographed bridge in all the world. Wow, that was the San Francisco Bay. So much to learn about, such deep, wonderful history. Now, onward we march. Next, we head north to the Pacific Northwest, where we will gather facts about the Puget Sound. The Puget Sound of the Pacific Northwest is an inlet of the Pacific Ocean and part of the Salish Sea. It is located along the northwestern coast of the U.S. state of Washington. It is a complex estuary system of connected marine waterways and basins, with one major and two minor connections to the open Pacific Ocean via the Strait of Juan de Fuca being the major connection. The two minor connections to the Pacific Ocean include the Deception Pass and the Swinomish Channel. Its average depth is 450 feet with a maximum depth of 930 feet. There is a group of 170 islands called the San Juan Islands within the Puget Sound. This body of water runs through the state for about 100 miles from Whidbey Island in the north south to Olympia, Washington. Puget Sound is also the third largest estuary in the United States after the Chesapeake Bay and San Francisco Bay. In 2009, the term Salish Sea was established by the United States Board on Geographic Names as the collective waters of Puget Sound, which include the Strait of Juan de Fuca, the Strait of Georgia, Bellingham Bay, and the San Juan Islands region. However, the term Puget Sound is used not only for the body of water but also for the Puget Sound region centered around the sound. Significant cities here include Seattle, Tacoma, Olympia, and Everett in Washington state. In 1792, George Vancouver gave the name Puget Sound to the waters south of the Tacoma Narrows in honor of Peter Puget, a lieutenant that explored along with him on the Vancouver expedition. The first European settlement in the Puget Sound area was Fort Nisqually, which was a fur trade post of the Hudson's Bay Company established in 1833. Fort Nisqually was part of the Hudson's Bay Company Columbia District, headquartered at Fort Vancouver. The first American settlement on Puget Sound was Tumwater. It was founded in 1845 by Americans who had come via the Oregon Trail. The decision to settle north of the Columbia River was made in part because of one of the settlers. His name was George Washington Bush, and he was a mix of African and Irish. The government of Oregon banned mulattoes from settling in the Oregon Territory, which at the time went north into the current state of Washington, onward into Canada and to the east. Still, the government was known to not pursue enforcement of the restriction north of the Columbia River. So George Washington Bush, along with 5 other families, broke away from the Oregon Trail and headed north. Then in 1853, Washington Territory was formed from a part of the Oregon Territory. In 1888, the Northern Pacific Railroad line reached Puget Sound, linking the region to eastern states. A unique state-run ferry system, the Washington State Ferries, connects the larger islands to the Washington mainland, as well as both sides of the Sound, with vessels capable of carrying passengers as well as automobiles. The system carries 24 million passengers annually and is the largest ferry service in the United States. Today, the Puget Sound is a popular tourist destination with Seattle, along with the close-by San Juan Islands. Sea kayaking and orca whale watching are 2 of the primary attractions. San Juan Island's Lime Kiln Point State Park is a prime whale watching site. At high tide, the archipelago comprises over 400 islands and rocks, 128 of which are named, with over 478 miles of shoreline. The majority of the San Juan Islands are quite hilly, with some flat area valleys in between that are quite fertile. The tallest peak is Mount Constitution on Orcas Island at an elevation of 2,407 feet. The coastlines are a mix of sandy and rocky beaches, shallow inlets and deep harbors, placid covers and reef-studded bays. Gnarled ochre-colored madrona trees grace much of the shorelines, while evergreen fir and pine forests cover large inland areas. Here you see a map of western Washington, and this large area is where the Olympic Mountains reside, and this is where the San Juan Islands are. The San Juan Islands get substantially less rainfall than in Seattle, which sits 65 miles southeast of the islands on the Puget Sound. This is due to the rain shadow of the beautiful Olympic Mountains. What an amazing place, with such a bounty of beauty and opportunity to explore. Now, we go east all the way across the United States to Pamlico Sound, off the shores of North Carolina. Here we go to our final destination. Pamlico Sound in North Carolina in the U.S. is the largest lagoon along the North American East Coast, extending 80 miles long and 15 to 20 miles wide. It is part of an extensive interconnected network of lagoon estuaries that includes Albemarle Sound, Currituck Sound, Croton Sound, Bogue Sound, Core Sound, and Roanoke Sound. Together, these sounds, known as the Albemarle-Pamlico Sound System, covers over 3,000 square miles of open water. The Pamlico Sound is separated from the Atlantic Ocean by the Outer Banks, a row of low, sandy barrier islands. As mentioned, Pamlico Sound is a lagoon, and in case you are wondering, a lagoon is a shallow body of water separated from a larger body of water by barrier islands or reefs. In March of 1524, during the Age of Exploration, there was an explorer that reported that he found the Pacific Ocean. He was from Italy, and his name was Giovanni di Verrazzano. However, he was mistaken. What he thought was the Pacific Ocean was actually Pamlico Sound. The basis of his conclusion stemmed from his perception of the vast expanse and separation from the Atlantic Ocean by the barrier islands that are named the Outer Banks. If he was right, then the U.S. would be a much smaller place. This sound received its name from the Pamlico Native American tribe. This tribe lived along the banks of Pamlico's mainland. They were referred to as the Pamuak by the explorers from the Raleigh expeditions in circa 1584. 3 locations of Pamlico Sound in the Outer Banks between Cape Hatteras and Cape Fear were once under serious consideration by the United States Atomic Energy Commission as an atomic bomb test site during the late 1940s and early 1950s. But thankfully, that didn't happen. They looked elsewhere. Instead, 37 years later in 1987, Congress declared the Albemarle-Pamlico Sound an estuary of national significance. For vacationers, the Outer Banks of Pamlico Sound is a water sports playground providing opportunities for fishing, crabbing, boating, kayaking, sailing, windsurfing, kiteboarding, parasailing, paddleboarding, and more. In 2012, the economic bounty caused by the high level of tourism exceeded $1.3 billion. The Sound also supports local commercial fishing, crabbing, shrimping, clamming, and oystering. Here, 90% of North Carolina's commercial fishing catches are attributed to Pamlico Sound, generating almost $100 million per year. Along the coastal areas are numerous waterfowl nesting sites, including Pea Island National Wildlife Refuge on the Outer Banks and Swan Quarter National Wildlife Refuge on the mainland. Dolphins and sea turtles are abundant, with occasional visits by seals, such as harp seal, in early January and February. Many other species include rare species of fin whales, Cuvier's beaked whales, and orcas are present off Outer Banks and Cape Hatteras. Endangered species such as leatherback turtles, great white sharks, and basking sharks are also known to visit the Sound as well. That was a fantastic final destination, Pamlico Sound. That is all for this week's lesson. Your homework for this week will be doing your initial worksheet for the U.S. bays plus one Canadian bay that includes all of today's lesson. Then on 2 separate days this week, complete 2 of the worksheets called Memorization through Repetition, which includes the geography learned today plus the last 5 lessons. And next week, we are going to take a detour with a movie and a questionnaire. Stay tuned for details and get your pencils sharpened. Bye for now.